Hello, welcome to Tortuga.dev and to another devlog for my work in progress farming game, GNOME. If you've seen the previous one, you may remember that I said I would try to release one video a month, but I don't think there's anybody actually following this series, but I won't be able to do that. I don't know how often I'll be able to release them, but I'm going to be very busy, and I have been very busy, and for now, all I have for you is this great episode 3. Since the last video, I've made some good progress on some of the game's fundamental systems. First is a few visual updates and new plants, and then we'll get into 2 new systems that I previewed last time. Possibly the most obvious visual change is the effects. First, I've changed the player's light to be less intense, and I think it's a slightly better look. I've also added some post-processing effects. I don't know too much about it, but there's some subtle bloom and vignette and some other things. There are also some redesigns since the last episode, like this new dandelion look. This is also the style I've tried to go for when drawing other plants and things. It's kind of 3D and not super outlined, if that makes sense, not super cartoony. Any good farming game needs a variety of plants, right? And I've finally gotten around to adding some. The first plant is thyme, which is an herb, and I say herb because there's going to be a way to categorize plants later, but I haven't implemented that yet, but I plan to at some point. The next one is sage, another herb, and these 3 plants are probably going to be the first 3 that people end up growing, and they all have different traits like buy and sell price and grow time. The last plant is marigold, flower. Flowers are generally going to be the most quickly growing plants, but also the least profitable. And their role is essentially to be the plants that you have to grow to fulfill a quota. If you haven't seen the last video, quotas are basically going to be an item or something that you have to get in a certain amount of time. So flowers are going to be something that you have to go out of your way to get in some manner. Except for dandelions, of course, because those are the cheapest and earliest crops you can buy. So that's all the plants I've added, and I want to let you know I probably won't update you on many plants from now on. I'll just be adding them as I continue working on the game, just because there's going to be a lot of them in the final product. Next up is the long-awaited mushrooms. To get one, you have to buy a spore with clovers. In order to do that, you have to go to the mushrooms tab in the shop. The deal with mushrooms is that they can only grow when they have a certain amount of shade. The amount of shade is different for each mushroom, and you give a mushroom shade by growing plants next to them. Plants also have different amounts of provided shade. The first mushroom I've added is the single glow shroom. This one actually requires no shade, and it's the only one that is like that. So you can grow it without the ability to make seeds. In fact, you need to grow at least a couple of these before you can get seeds. This is because there's a currency you get from harvesting mushrooms called spirit. However, these mushrooms only give 1 spirit each, and you need a lot more than that for most things. As you can see, this mushroom has a slight glow to it. That's something that all mushrooms will do, but only when there's enough shade. The next one I've implemented is the double glow shroom, which gives you 4 spirit. This one does require shade, but it's very little, so this will probably be farmed pretty early on. With this one, I will demonstrate the shade and spirit systems. At first, if I just plant this on its own and start daytime, you'll notice it won't grow since it has no shade. However, if I have some seeds and plant some next to it, it will grow. Also, it won't count the shade unless the plant is fully grown. So plants that grow fast and have high shade are going to be the best for growing mushrooms. The last mushroom I've implemented is, as you might have guessed, the triple glow shroom. This is the biggest placeable object in the game so far, and eventually I want to have a bunch of things like this since the gnome is pretty small. This one requires more shade and takes longer, but it provides 9 spirit. So far, you might not be sure exactly what you're supposed to do with spirit. Well, its purpose is actually for buying machines, and there's one new machine I've created. This is the grave digger. If you've seen the last video, you might remember the seed flower, which is a machine that stores a harvested plant and turns it into a seed. You might also remember that if you didn't do this, your plant would be sold. Now the grave digger is the solution to that. If you want to keep a plant as it is, you have to store it in the grave digger, like this. Then during the day, it'll be buried underground. and you can take it out afterward. You might be wondering why you'd want to do this. Well, as I mentioned before, there will be quotas where you might have to make a certain item. And if I want to prepare for this by growing a variety of plants, this is how I can store them. Now it's time for the biggest change, the index. And you've surely seen the index text down here at the bottom. And you can pull up the menu by pressing E. This is basically an index of all the placeable objects in the game. As you can see, there's an entry for every plant that has its basic information on it. The information here is important for gameplay, since you'll be able to plan out ahead of time how you plant certain things. For instance, with mushrooms, you'll want to figure out the required shade for each mushroom and how much shade each plant gives, so you can figure out the best ways to farm mushrooms. You can also see the clovers ratio. For dandelions, you can make back double the clovers you spend growing on them, and this paired with the grow time would make it a really good crop, that is, if it weren't for its stock. See, each plant has a different stock in the shop, meaning the number you're allowed to buy in one night is limited. The dandelion stock starts out really low, but this is where the other part of the index comes in. If you click this upgrade button on a plant, you can spend clovers to upgrade its attributes. For now, the only thing plants have is stock, but that might change in the future. And if you have enough clovers, you can increase the stock a few times, which means you can make a greater profit off that plant. The last important part of the index, as you may have noticed already, is the locks. Most items are going to be locked at the beginning of the game, and they can be unlocked with a specific item. In order for me to unlock the sage plant, I'll need one time, as shown on the lock. The lock works as you'd expect. If I don't have the right key, it won't unlock. But if I've grown some time, I can unlock it, and I'm now able to buy the sage from the shop. Well, that's all I've got for this devlog. So far, I've been pretty optimistic about this project, and I'm glad it's still going well. I know some people struggle, a lot of developers in specific struggle with seeing projects through to their ends, but fortunately I've been able to keep the motivation going for this game, and I hope some people are going to want to play it when it comes out. I think the final product is going to be fun, but there's still a lot of work to be done. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might consider subscribing, just so you can follow this project wherever it goes and whenever I make another video on it. But either way, that's all I've got. Thanks for watching.